Good evening, everybody from Beach Church and anybody else that might happen to have happened across this video. It just occurred to me, I never introduced myself. I don't think I've ever introduced myself once in about 2 years of doing these videos. And I don't know if that's prideful or humble. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm Zeb from Beach Church, and let's talk about 1 Samuel 19 through 21, which is really the essence of the recent film that was out about David that was so popular that if I put up a video about anything else, people didn't want to see it. If I put up a video about David, then, it would just, I'd get thousands of views, literally. So that was very popular. As a matter of fact, I know that Jimmy loved the film and that his kids, he would listen to the soundtrack, which is fantastic, by the way. Fantastic soundtrack from that David movie that was out earlier. This year, or was it at the end of last year? Anyway, they would all, like they had, in Jimmy's family, they all had their own favorite songs from the film. It was really good. If you get a chance, it's probably circulating on streaming somewhere. Anyway, let's get into that story because it's really all from 1 Samuel 19 through 21. So first of all, let's talk about two other people. Jonathan. Jonathan was David's closest friend. He actually said that Jonathan loved David. No, not that way. Get your mind out of the gutter and out of the sin of the world. He loved David as his own soul. So in chapter 19, John, who's actually Saul's eldest son, you remember King Saul, he risks his standing with his father to advocate for David's innocence, reminding the king of David's loyal service, and in the process jeopardizing his own kingship at some point in the future, because he could have been the heir as the son of the king. In chapter 20, after realizing that Saul is determined to kill David, now there was this whole thing where David is like, he's trying to kill me. And Jonathan is like, no, he's not trying to kill you. And David sets up this thing with Saul, with Jonathan, that determines very clearly to Jonathan that Saul was trying indeed to kill David. And then included also a secret signal with arrows to warn David to flee. So David was really good with his slingshot. Jonathan was really good with arrows. Yeah, okay. And then the other character is Michal, I suppose, David's first wife, and Saul's younger daughter, and the first woman in the Bible, by the way, who explicitly is described as actually being in love with a man. They gave the dignity to a woman in the Bible at that point because of society. The culture did not dignify or celebrate women as people. I mean, couldn't be a witness, couldn't be a lot of things, couldn't have a job. Yeah, it was tough if you were a woman back in those days, I would presume. But in chapter 19, when Saul sends messengers to David's house to kill him, sent messengers not to deliver, well, it's kind of a message, you're dead. Michal warns David to run for his life. To buy David time to escape, she lets him down through a window and places a household idol. It says here a teraphim. And I know of different kinds of angels that have similar names, but this is a idol of a god, like quote unquote God, starting with the calf, the golden calf, and Baal, and all the rest of those jokers. Anyway, so this was a household idol in his bed, covered with goat's hair to look like a sleeping person. So in other words, if you had a ventriloquist dummy, but maybe a larger one, and you stuck it in the bed and you put some goat's hair on it and it looked like it was actually a person sleeping in the bed, that's how she bought some time for David. When Saul discovered her trickery, She protects herself by claiming that David threatened to kill her if she didn't help him. This was a smart woman. If you're a dude and you're not married yet, look for a woman like Michal. Together they represent a divided household. While Saul seeks David's life, his own children choose loyalty to God's anointed future king over their father's destructive commands. So basically 1 Samuel 19 through 21 teaches that God is so sovereignly protective of his chosen, often intervening to thwart human schemes and jealousy. It highlights David's dependence on during persecution, and Jonathan's loyalty, contrasting with Saul's destructive, paranoid disobedience and spiritual decline. Actually, in the film I was telling you about, he's a really big guy. He's a really ugly guy. He's very, very paranoid and obsessed. And such is the way of kings. Sometimes they go nuts. They can't take that much adulation and power and so forth. Actually, it happens these days too. Key lessons from 1 Samuel 19 through 21. Divine protection and sovereignty. As I said, God actively intervenes to save David from Paul's murderous attempts, proving that human authority cannot prevail against divine purpose. We've learned that over and over again, and still we haven't learned it. A lot of people have not learned it. The power of jealousy and disobedience. Saul's obsession with David causes him to lose his peace and his mind, if you watch the film, and eventually his kingdom, showing how insecurity can lead to extreme spiritual decline. Have you ever seen Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan? You know, how the Ricardo Montalban Khan character becomes completely obsessed because his is a superior intellect, and he's like, Kirk tasks me and I will have him. Yeah, well, his whole ship is blowing up and he had everything that he wanted with the Genesis device and everything. That wasn't important, just his obsession. That's kind of how Saul is. True friendship. So hard to find these days. Actually, it's been hard for me for years. And it's not that I didn't know people. It's not that I didn't have people that knew me and we got along and there was activity that we had in common, be it softball or Middle East peace group I was involved in. Yeah, right. And things of that nature. But, yeah, it's hard to find friends, you know? Because people are just so busy. People are just so swamped. They're overwhelmed, and you can do stuff with them, but you know, unless you have been with them for a long time, from an earlier time when life was maybe a little bit less simple and less technological. I don't know. You want to be my friend? Okay. Jonathan demonstrates selflessness by protecting. I do have a few friends actually in the church. I spent New Year's Day with one of them. You know, Jimmy told me, you know, that one of the best advices that he ever got was, you know, when you're doing a sermon, don't talk about yourself. I'm not doing a sermon. I'm doing a commentary, but I am talking about myself too much. I'm going to roll on here. Jonathan demonstrates selflessness by protecting David, choosing to honor God's will over his own father's demands. You just knew it was not a winning proposition to align yourself with Saul in any way. God's presence, if you watch the movie, God's presence brings humility. Saul is forced to prophesy, falling before God, which shows that God can humiliate prideful leaders and render them powerless when they go too far. Nebuchadnezzar, wasn't he the one who was king, and then the next thing he knew he was out in the fields eating grass with the cows? Yeah, so, you know, if you ever find yourself in a position like that, make sure that you are continuing to be humble. Trust in times of fear. Despite his fear, David continues to flee and seek God. For instance, escaping through a window because of Michal, escaping to Samuel. Remember, the name of the book is Samuel. Modeling reliance on God instead of personal revenge. I don't know. I can get into the whole messianic aspect of it, but I don't have to do that in every video. But I guarantee you, big time, that it's in there, especially when David's involved. Let's just move on to next week, because I think I'm done talking about this scene. But watch the movie. Oh, what was it called? The Story of David. I mean, it was a pretty simple, straightforward, not complicated title like that. And it was great. It was just a lot of fun. And it was really well done. A musical, animated, with fantastic music and dance and everything. They got the animated characters dancing, and really tells the story. And I don't know how many of the people, considering the state of anti-Semitism in the world today, I don't know how many people watched that movie and realized that they were, watching a movie about the David whose star is represented on the flag of Israel. But this is that David. Also in the lineage, Jesus is son of David. I'm done. I'm just so done. I'll see you next week. It was fun, and I hope you enjoyed it too.